Hey guys, still be taking a look at the 2022 governor's map based on the latest polling data that has been released. So a lot of new polls have come out for these gubernatorial elections over the last couple of weeks, and so that is why we now have polling data in basically every single state on the ballot this November. There are a few states in which there is no polling data from. These are the states that I have already filled in, and that is because these states are just so solid for either one party. So I'm going to start off with the state of Oregon, where the polling data right now is pretty worrying for the Democrats. If you look at the polling here in the state of Oregon, there is a three-way race between Tina Kotek, Christine Drazan, and Betsy Johnson. Betsy Johnson is a former Democrat who is now running as an independent. She was a member of the Oregon Senate, and so she is really playing spoiler here to the Democrats' chances at winning this race. And because of Kotek and Johnson splitting the independent vote, Christine Drazan is doing surprisingly well. She has actually led in 2 of the 3 polls released, but I am going to give the polling average to Tina Kotek because in this one poll here, Drazan only came in 3rd place with 23%. So I do expect Betsy Johnson to do a lot worse than what her polling numbers currently suggest. She is an independent, and typically independents almost always do worse than what polling may initially suggest. So as of right now, I'm going to categorize Oregon based on the polling data as being tilt for the Democratic Party. Now, moving on to the state of Nevada, we have another very competitive race, but not because it's a 3-way race, but because it is the state of Nevada. Nevada's race was always going to be very competitive. It is going to be between incumbent Steve Sisolak and Joe Lombardo. Sisolak won his first term in office in 2018 against Adam Laxalt. Yes, the same Adam Laxalt that is now running for Senate against Catherine Cortez Masto. But Steve Sisolak is in a better position in the governor's race than Cortez Masto is in her Senate race. Joe Lombardo is the Republican nominee. He has come out in favor of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. That is going to hurt him in Nevada. And looking at the latest polls, Steve Sisolak leads by 2.1% on average. If you do look at all of the polls between the two candidates, it really is very messy. Lombardo leads by 1 point in the latest poll, but it is only due to the fact that it is funded by a partisan sponsor for the GOP. The 2 previous polls showed Sisolak leading by pretty large margins, but obviously he's not going to win by anything like 9 to 12%. So currently, according to the polling data, it is going to be lean for the Democrats. I do think Steve Sisolak does have a slight advantage going into this race, but it still is very much a toss-up. Now, in the state of Arizona, this is a race that the Republicans are a tiny bit favored in if you just look at how the state has voted in the past. In 2018, Arizona voted for Doug Ducey by 14 percentage points. So Arizona would have to make a big shift to the left from 4 years ago if it were to vote Democrat. If you look at the latest polls between Katie Hobbs and Carrie Lake, these are the 2 presumptive nominees. Katie Hobbs is the incumbent Secretary of State, and she, of course, played a big role in not allowing Donald Trump to attempt to overturn the election results in Arizona. But currently, according to the latest poll, Hobbs is up by 5. A previous poll showed Lake up 1, but this most recent poll was funded by the Katie Hobbs campaign. So the polling data really does not tell us too much about this race, except for the fact that it will be very close. If you look at the predictions from these sources, every single source, a political source, you have the Cook Political Report, Sabros Crystal Ball, Politico, RCP, even Fox News and 538, every single source has the Arizona governor's race as being a toss-up. But right now, according to the polling data, the Democrats do have a slight advantage. We're really just going to have to see what happens here over the next couple of months. The race in Arizona is going to be a very high-profile one, and I do expect a lot more polls to be released once the primaries are over in early August. Now, in the state of Colorado, Jared Polis is running for his re-election to a 2nd term. A very popular governor. Currently, he is up by solid margins against Heidi Gonnell. So Jared Polis is basically guaranteed at this point to win his re-election, and so that is why, according to the polling numbers, Colorado is going to be a solid blue state. Now, in the state of New Mexico, things are very much different here. Although New Mexico and Colorado had a very similar shift to the left over the last couple of years, New Mexico on the gubernatorial level this year is going to be a lot more competitive than Colorado. On the Democratic side, you have Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is running for her 2nd term in office against Mark Ronchetti. Mark Ronchetti is one of the best Republicans that the GOP could have nominated, one of the better nominees that the GOP has put up on the ballot this November. Michelle Lujan Grisham is a relatively weak candidate. She is not popular in her state. She has a sexual misconduct allegation against her. She paid money for them to hush up about it. So Michelle Lujan Grisham is not exactly the best candidate, but she is still the incumbent governor. That will help her. New Mexico is still a state that is heavily Democratic leaning, and of course the state did vote for Lujan Grisham by 14% 4 years ago. So as of right now, I'm going to categorize the state of New Mexico also as being lean for the Democratic Party, just based on the latest polls that we have seen. Now, moving on to the state of Alaska. Alaska is going to be solid for the GOP. Mike Dunleavy is polling pretty well right now. Looking at the latest polls in Alaska, it is also a three-way race here between Les Gara, the Democratic nominee, Mike Dunleavy, the Republican nominee, and Bill Walker, the former independent governor of Alaska. He was elected in 2014, but right now Mike Dunleavy leads by very solid margins over the rest of the field, and that is, of course, because of the fact that the liberal vote is being split by Gara and Walker. So right now, looking at the latest polls in Alaska, it is going to be solid for the GOP. And so finishing off the western half of the United States, in the state of Kansas, this is another big race with Laura Kelly running as the Democratic incumbent. And right now against Eric Schmidt, Laura Kelly is polling very okay. I would say that she is still probably going to lose her re-election, but the polling numbers really could be a lot worse. So Laura Kelly is a Democrat, and she won the Kansas gubernatorial election in 2018 against Chris Kobach. This was a big win for the Democratic Party. Granted, Kobach was a terrible candidate, and Greg Orman did help Laura Kelly split the more conservative vote, but Laura Kelly in 2022 is now facing a very tough re-election. She is going to win her nomination. Derek Schmidt is currently expected to win the Republican nomination. He is the Attorney General of the state of Kansas, has been for over 10 years now, so he has good name recognition in his state, and right now the polling does show it is still a pretty even race, but clearly the GOP is going to have the slight advantage here. This is still Kansas, a state that has not voted for a Democrat on the presidential level since 1964. So right now, according to the polls, I have the state of Kansas as being lean for the Republicans. In the state of Oklahoma, obviously, it is going to be very solid here for the GOP. In Oklahoma, we have Kevin Stitt running for his second term in office. He is running against Joy Hoffmeister. Hoffmeister is a former Republican. She is now a Democrat, so she's doing better than what I would expect a typical Democrat to do in his race, but still, she is doing pretty poorly here against Kevin Stitt. Kevin Stitt is still leading by very solid margins in all of the polls that have been released. So right now, in the state of Oklahoma, according to the polls, obviously, it is going to be very solid for the Republican Party. And finally, in the state of Texas, it's going to be likely for the GOP. This is another big race on the ballot this November, with Greg Abbott running for his second term, and he is currently being challenged by Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke, of course, came in very close to defeating Ted Cruz in 2018 in that Senate race, but against Greg Abbott, things are going to be a little bit different here. Beto O'Rourke is not doing nearly as well. Looking at the polling average, Beto O'Rourke is down by almost 10 percentage points against Greg Abbott. Abbott is fairly popular in his state of Texas, and really, 2022 being the year that it is favoring the GOP, 2022 really is not going to be the year where the Democrats flip the state of Texas. So looking at the latest polls in Texas, it will be likely for the GOP. And so now we have all of the western states finished, and we have 20 seats currently for the Republicans and 15 for the Democrats. Now moving on to the Midwest and North Atlantic region of the U.S., starting off with the state of Minnesota, where Tim Walz is running for his re-election as the Democratic incumbent. In the state of Minnesota, Tim Walz leads by pretty mediocre margins against Scott Jensen in all the polls that have been released. Jensen is pretty much going to win the Republican nomination, and of course Tim Walz, who won by almost 10%, over 10% in 2018, is going to face a little bit tougher of a re-election race, mainly because of the fact that the national environment really is just not favoring the Democrats right now. Tim Walz, though, is still a relatively strong governor. He is also very popular in his state, and so that is going to make it so that he is probably still going to end up winning his re-election, but the race is going to be a lot closer than last time, and he really is going to have to work for it. So right now, Minnesota, according to the polling average, is going to be lean for the Democratic Party. And in the state of Iowa, we have a little bit less of a competitive race. It is going to be a very solid, likely state for the GOP here in Iowa. In Iowa, Kim Reynolds is running for her second term against Dedri DeGier, and right now, according to the latest polls, Kim Reynolds is up by double digits. If you look at the 2018 race, though, it was a lot closer. Kim Reynolds only defeated Mike Hubbell by 2.7%. So last time it was a very close race, like what we saw in North Dakota with Kristi Noem, but this time around, as Kim Reynolds is running for her re-election, she is going to have a much more solid victory this November. So Iowa, I think, is going to be likely right now just based on the polling data. And we're going to finish it off with the state of Arkansas. These are going to be all of the states west of the Mississippi. In the state of Arkansas, obviously, it is going to be very solid for the Republican Party. In Arkansas, we have Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the new Republican nominee for the governorship. She, of course, is going to succeed Asa Hutchinson, current two-term governor, who cannot run for a third term this November. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders is polling very well. She, of course, was the former press secretary to Donald Trump. And so, of course, Arkansas will be solid. And now we're going to finish off the Midwestern region of the United States. So starting off with the state of Wisconsin, this is a big race on the ballot this November with Tony Evers running for his re-election. The latest polls actually suggest a likely margin of victory for Tony Evers. Granted, there has really only been one poll released from the state, but in the state of Wisconsin, Tony Evers leads by 7% against Tim Mitchells. Mitchells is the current frontrunner to win the Republican nomination. Before, it was Rebecca Kleefisch, who had been leading on the GOP side for a very long time. Kleefisch is the former lieutenant governor under Scott Walker, who of course lost to the Tony Evers ticket in 2018. However, as of right now, Tim Mitchells is the new frontrunner, and not just because of the fact that he's leading white by 1% in the two latest polls, but he just entered the race, and he also received the endorsement of Donald Trump, and that is probably going to be enough for him to end up winning the nomination early next month. So right now, state of Wisconsin, I currently have as being likely for the Democrats. Obviously, Tony Evers is not going to win by anything over 5%, but still, the polling data is still very positive for him right now, and obviously, we're going to get a lot more polls in the coming months after the GOP primary is over. In the state of Illinois, the latest poll actually shows the race to be surprisingly close. It will also be likely for the Democratic Party. In 2018, this race was a blowout for J.B. Pritzker. J.B. Pritzker defeated Bruce Rauner, the Republican incumbent, by 15.7%. So J.B. Pritzker won his race very solidly last time. This time around, it will be a little bit different. Looking at the latest polls in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker is only up by 7% against Darren Bailey. However, this is a Republican-funded poll, so in the end, J.B. Pritzker is still likely to win by double digits, but currently the polling data only gives him a 7-point lead, but that is pretty much due to the fact that there's really only been one poll release. So right now, the state of Illinois is going to be likely for the Democrats. And in the state of Michigan, a very solid margin for the Democrats. Gretchen Whitmer, according to all the latest polls, leads by a solid margin. So in the state of Michigan right now, Gretchen Whitmer leads by over 30 points compared to every potential GOP candidate that she may face. So basically what's going on here is that in Michigan, the former frontrunner James Craig was disqualified, and so basically he was the one with the good chance at defeating Gretchen Whitmer. The race was very close previously, but now as a result of Craig being disqualified due to not submitting enough valid signatures to appear on the ballot in time, these other four Republicans that are now the new frontrunners are in a very contested race. Basically, a majority of the GOP in Michigan is still undecided in this race, but right now Gretchen Whitmer does lead very solidly over all of them, so the state of Michigan is going to be solid for the Democrats according to the latest polls. In the state of Ohio, it is also going to be solid, but of course for the GOP, this is the race in which Mike DeWine is running for his re-election in. He also won by a pretty small margin in 2018, winning Ohio by just 3.7%, but this time he was expected to win by a much more solid margin against Nan Willey. Mike DeWine, according to the latest poll, leads by 16% in the state of Ohio. I think that he can manage a solid win, but it is going to hover around that 15% range. But according to the latest poll, it is going to be solid for the GOP. In the state of Pennsylvania, this is going to be another state here in the Midwest that will go for the Democrats. This time, it will be a race between Josh Shapiro and Doug Mastriano. Mastriano, as I've said many times, is one of the worst nominees the GOP has nominated this election cycle, and this is showing as a result of the poll numbers. Josh Shapiro currently leads by 3% and 4%, according to the three latest polls that have been released just last month. So Josh Shapiro right now is in a good position going into this race. It is still going to be a very close one, but I mean, looking at at the fact that the Democrats won by over 15% last time with Tom Wolf as the Democratic incumbent running for his re-election, I do think that the Democrats will do well in Pennsylvania. I do think Josh Shapiro will end up being the next governor of the state, but it will still be a very close race. The latest polling, I think, does overestimate the Democrats just a little bit, but as of right now, Shapiro does lead by a lean margin over Doug Mastriano in the latest polls for the Pennsylvania governor's race. In the state of New York, obviously, it is going to be very solid for the Democrats. Here, Kathy Hochul is running for her re-election. She is going to be running against Lee Zeldin, and Hochul, of course, only took office in 2021 after Andrew Cuomo resigned due to his whole array of scandals, but Kathy Hochul now leads by 18% on average over Lee Zeldin. If you look at the 2018 race, though, Cuomo won by 23%, so I don't expect Hochul to do nearly as well as Cuomo did last time. Hochul is not popular in the state of New York. She is the first female governor of the Empire State, but as of right now, the state of New York is going to be solid, but only barely for the Democrats. In the state of New Hampshire, it is obviously going to be very solid for the Republicans. Chris Sununu is a very popular incumbent Republican governor. Right now, he leads by solid margins over Sherman, and you can see these are huge margins. In 2018, he was able to win by just 10%, I believe, 7% in 2018, but in 2020, the margin went all the way up to 32% against Stan Felt. 2018 was, only a small margin compared to what we saw in 2020. 2016, though, he only won by 2.3%. So Chris Sununu has quickly become one of the most popular governors in the country, and that is why he is going to win his re-election this November very, very easily. And moving on to the state of Maine. In the state of Maine, it is going to be lean for the Democratic Party. Currently, Janet Mills is running for her second term in office. She will be running against former Governor Paul LePage, who was elected in 2010 and 2014. He was unable to run for a third consecutive term, but this November, he is running for a third non-consecutive term. So Paul LePage is a good candidate. He is someone that can win. He has won in the past. However, Janet Mills is relatively popular in her state, and right now, the polling data does suggest a victory for her. So right now, she does lead up with a lean margin here in the state of Maine. In Massachusetts, it's going to be very solid for Maura Healey. Maura Healey is expected to win the governor's race in Massachusetts, becoming the new governor of Massachusetts, succeeding Republican Charlie Baker. And in the state of Connecticut, we also have a pretty interesting race here as well. It is only going to be likely for the Democrats with Ned Lamont running for his re-election. Ned Lamont is a very unpopular governor, and against Bob Stefanowski, the same candidate that he faced in 2018, Lamont is going to struggle here a little bit. Last time the race was very close. Lamont only defeated Stefanowski by 3%. I think he will do better this time, but it won't be any sort of impressive victory for the Democratic incumbent. Ned Lamont is a very unpopular governor, and that is going to massively hurt his chances of winning this November, but the latest polls, though, do show that he has a likely lead over Stefanowski. Now, we have just two more states left on this map, starting off with the state of Georgia, where Stacey Abrams is running against Brian Kemp for a second time. However, it is going to be likely currently for the GOP. The latest polls show Brian Kemp up on average by 5% over Stacey Abrams. The race is not going to be as close as it was in 2018. Stacey Abrams simply is not going to do as well. The national environment simply does not favor her anymore, and Brian Kemp, as the incumbent, is also going to get an advantage from the fact that he is now running for a second term as the governor already in office. So Stacey Abrams is going to struggle this time. I don't think she's going to win. Of course, she played a major role in helping Democrats to win in Georgia 3 times in 2020, but 2022 is not going to be her year, and so that is why I currently have Georgia as likely for the GOP based on these polls. And finally, in the state of Florida, the polls currently suggest a lean margin of victory for Ron DeSantis. It is going to be between Ron DeSantis and Charlie Crist. Crist is the former governor that was elected all the way back in 2006. He is going to end up winning the nomination against Nikki Fried, but Charlie Crist currently is polling pretty mediocre compared to Ron DeSantis. Charlie Crist has not been able to win a statewide race as an independent or a Democrat. In 2006, he won as a Republican, and so that is why he is obviously going to lose again. Ron DeSantis is one of the most popular governors in the country. Right now, he only has a lean margin of victory, but I do think that he can win by over 5%. In 2018, of course, he was actually expected to lose this race according to the polls by a pretty strong margin for the Democrats. So this is the 2022 governor's map based on the latest polls released. 26 governorships for the Republicans, 24 for the Democrats. These, again, are not my predictions. These are just the numbers that we're seeing from the latest polling averages. So again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.